August Public Safety Meeting to order. I am Lisa Dorsey, Chair of the committee, and I'm here with Nicole Shimoni and Brian McGinnis. The first item beyond the call of order is announcements. Are there any announcements tonight for public safety? Okay, seeing none, we're going to move on to comments, suggestions, petitions by residents in attendance regarding items not on the agenda. Would you like to come up, sir? Yes, if it's not on the agenda. Okay, you'll state your name and your address?
My name's Robert Snodgrass, 715 Taylor Road, Downingtown, PA. We have in Pennsylvania, I'm not sure how aware you are of this or not, probably the worst health crisis going on anywhere in this country. It is killing people at more than 10 times the rate of ever before. I discovered this by my mom walking into the hospital, Chester County Hospital, with my mom about a year ago, with her with nothing anywhere near life-threatening wrong with her, and she was killed. This wasn't anything to do with anything that she went in there for. She didn't have anything life-threatening wrong with her. And I mean, it was, I have professional medical testimonies to the fact that this doctor killed my mom, did things that he shouldn't have done. And the one major thing that he did not do, that even a nurse was telling him he has to do. When, after my mom got out of there, she had a small incision and it became infected, and the home nurse told the surgeon, sent him a picture, text, by telephone, tried very hard to get him to address it, told him that this is a red, swollen, painful, infected incision that needs attention right away, and he would not see her. And I called her doctor and urgent care, and everybody told me only the surgeon can address that, and he would not. And so I went into a whole, after my mom died, I went to the Department of Health, every department of Medicare, the Department of Aging, every agency, department, everything you can imagine. And I was really shocked to discover what was obvious. They were covering up for this doctor. And I mean, to the point, it was so bad, I started writing letters back to all these congressmen, senators, and stuff, saying, warning that we were headed for elder death by neglect and abuse epidemic in this state. I can, from the conditions that I'm seeing, not even knowing at the time that we were already there, and not until 6 months later, seeing articles start to come out that the state of Pennsylvania, the rate of elder death by neglect and abuse, and a lot of these people are ones that someone has already called and reported are being neglected, which I did, that later died from that neglect. And the rate is over 1,000% increase in just the last few years. There's nothing. And I mean, when measles goes up 20%, the World Health Organization is making a big thing about it. If cancer doubled in Westchester, every scientist in the world would be trying to figure out how this is happening. But when the rate of elder death by neglect and abuse is more than 10 times what it's ever been before, and the reason is very clear, is because there is no enforcement and regulation going on. I mean, I went to the police, Chief Carroll, the district attorney. There's 4 factors to negligent manslaughter, and in this kind of medical setting, and that's a duty of care, a breach of duty of care. The breach of duty causes injury, and the result of the injury is death. And all of those are given automatically except for the breach of duty, which I have medical professional testimonies of, that, I mean, very clearly this doctor refused, one thing he did was refuse to see my mom when a professional nurse was telling him she needs immediate attention for an infected incision. And, I mean, something has to happen. I mean, Chief Carroll should have arrested this doctor. The district attorney should have arrested this doctor. People should have, and because, I mean, if we stopped arresting people, if you're walking down the road with your mom and a drunk guy comes and runs her down and kills her, and the police come, and instead of arresting that guy, they not only refuse to arrest him, but actually aggressively protect him from consequences, which is what's going on.
Mr. Sawgress, I apologize for interrupting you, and I know that you've sent an email to all of council members, and I'm very, very sorry for the loss of your mother. We limit the comments to 5 minutes, so I need to ask you what you would like council to do. Custer County is out of our jurisdiction. It's not in the borough.
To confront the chief of police and the district attorney about, taking action against the doctor that killed my mom. That it's gotta, this guy can't just kill my mom and then go on like nothing happened with the protection of everybody that's supposed to be enforcing and regulating. Instead is doing the quite exactly opposite, which is the whole reason why we have such a, outrageous skyrocketed number of elders dying.
Yeah. And again, very sorry for the loss of your mom. I've lost my mom, so I know it's very, very difficult. It's not easy.
Well, you don't know what it's like to go through what I did. And
I don't.
times worse when nobody will do anything about it.
And unfortunately, I'm not sure that there's anything that Westchester Borough Council can do to assist you. I know that you've been in touch with the police, and you've named a couple of other agencies that may be able to help you, but I don't think council here tonight will be able to help you.
Those places that you're mentioning are the problem. They are the problem. They are the ones that need to be addressed. Why was this guy not arrested? And that, if it's not until that happens, this is never going to change. I think you have a responsibility to to speak up and do something for the well-being of our most precious beloved citizens. Who is more precious than our moms and grandmas and
Absolutely, but unfortunately, I don't think it's within our authority to rule on a doctor's negligence. If that is indeed what happened, it's really not something that public safety or, again, council can help you with tonight. I'm very sorry.
And you can you can bring it up to the police and the district attorney and say, I have a whole pamphlet here covering, things about this, and you can, I would beg you to please confront them and say how, about, it would be, like I said, like I made the comparison to DUIs, but, if they said we're no longer arresting people for DUI, wouldn't you speak up about that?
Again, that's not within our jurisdiction. That is a police matter. And I know that you've contacted the chief of police, as well as all council members. So again, I really apologize and
Would you at least speak to them? I mean, at least as a human being, we all have a heart, or we should anyway. And you can.
I will have a conversation, but I cannot commit to any outcome of that. But if that, I can commit to doing that. But there's really nothing else that this council or this committee can do to help you. I'm sorry.
You don't have to be sorry yet, because you don't know if talking to them, maybe you can change something.
Well, I appreciate you coming tonight and sharing your story. Thank you for your time. Any other comments, suggestions, petitions by residents in attendance? All right, we're going to move on to item number 4, reports. We'll start with the fire department.
Good evening, Mark Salem, Fire Chief. The department responded to 146 incidents for the month of July, with 56 being in the borough. This brings the yearly total for the department to 984, with 395 in Westchester. We are currently 100 incidents ahead of last year at this time. Members participated in 961 hours of training for July, along with 538 hours of additional activities. Like I've said before, these additional activities include public relations, time spent in station, gyms, training, preparation, and meetings. For 2024, the members have participated in 10,831 hours of training, along with 5,664 hours of activity hours. Notable instances for July, where July 12th, there was a vehicle into a structure on North High Street. Department rescue and structural class teams responded with Good Fellowship ambulance. The subject was removed from the vehicle and transported to a local hospital. July 17th, the department responded to a structure fire in Birmingham Township, finding fire come from the second floor and roof area of a large detached garage. Hoses were quickly deployed and the fire was extinguished. On July 17th, crews were also very busy with storms that came through the area, responding to multiple trees down, wires, water rescues, and calls for assistance in addition to the building fire. July 18th, the department responded to the Westchester Post Office on Airport Road for a large building fire. Crews made entry into the building, finding high heat and zero visibility conditions. The fire was located and extinguished. This incident is currently being investigated by federal and local authorities. The department has seen an increase in fire alarms for the month of July, with 44.52% of the responses being alarms. Station 51, First Westchester, also took delivery of the new brush unit, which should be placed in service this month. Respectfully.
Thanks, Chief. Just a couple of questions. One on the post office. Do you have like a current update on?
Unfortunately, I do not. It's currently being investigated by the ATF, the postal inspector, and the county fire marshals. So they have not given us any word on what was the cause of it.
Okay, thank you. And then the other question I have is on the truck that we were leasing. Has that,
Yes.
is that in service?
So we were driver training on it. We had an issue where we blew out the rings on two of the outriggers. So that it is currently back at the individual or the company that we're leasing it from and is getting repaired. Last I heard, there was no cost to the borough for the repairs.
Next, we have the Westchester Police Department.
Good evening, Josh Lee, the police chief. My report is the second part of the report is a little more lengthy, but I think that's going to be our next agenda item. Thank you. So we'll just go through like the first couple slides, Bill. As far as numbers, June versus July, we did see an uptick. We had 3 sex offenses, all 3 being indecent exposures, likely 3 different actors. We have solved 2 of those cases, fortunately, and we're investigating the 3rd and hope to make an arrest on the 3rd. But a weird little uptick, but we did see that. We did have 3 felonious assaults, 3 aggravated assaults. All 3 of those aggravated assaults were solved, which is also good. 2 months in a row, we didn't have any motor vehicle thefts. We did see a slight downtick in alcohol-related offenses and a slight uptick, in all other, which really includes noise violations, trespasses, public urination, stuff like that. That's really it for the first part, unless there's any questions.
Going back to Mr. Snodgrass, do you have any recommendations regarding the appropriate jurisdiction where there's more power that he can go to try to talk to them as opposed to?
If it happened at the Chester County Hospital, that would be covered by the West Goshen Township Police Department. This is not that. He did reference Chief Carroll, who is the police chief of West Goshen Police Department. Beyond that, if it's something much larger than that, maybe the Attorney General's office. Certainly, unfortunately, not Westchester Police Department.
Did you have anything, Mr. McGinnis? Okay. Anything else for Chief?
Not yet.
Okay.
Thanks.
Moving on to Good Fellowship.
Good evening, Chaz Brogan, EMS Chief from Good Fellowship Ambulance. The month of July, we had a total of 570 calls, 155 of which were in the borough, which is about 27%. Overall, our volume is trending down compared to last year, which is the first time we've seen that in a while. So just slightly, though. Really nothing else remarkable on the report, unless you have any questions on that.
Rest up. Students are on the way back.
I was going to get to that. Yes. Looking forward here. We have move-in coming up and we are certainly prepared for that. And, the nice thing is that brings back our Westchester University division as well, our student EMTs that respond from the campus. So we're looking forward to that. So,
Okay.
I just want to talk about a great story here. Bill, if you can switch over to that here. Okay. While he's pulling that up, a couple weeks ago, we had this gentleman walk into our building, and actually in June, he walked out his front door in Westchester Borough, had a sudden cardiac arrest, collapsed, and his neighbors actually saw it, thankfully, started hands-only CPR, called 911. Good Fellowship, Westchester Fire Department, Westchester Police Department all responded here. And this gentleman walked out of the hospital completely fine and came to visit us. So really great story. It really speaks to the value of CPR training, hands-only CPR. That's really what saved his life. But we wanted to show it there. That's a successful save of a rural resident just in the last month or so.
Great.
News
Great.
there. So
I just have
good.
one other question.
Yeah.
The National Night Out was rescheduled, or
Yeah.
do we have a new date?
Dave, you want to speak to that? It's next Tuesday evening at Henderson High School. So, and it's a Meet Your First Responder event now, right? So we'll all be there.
So August 20th at Henderson
Yes. What time? At 5:30.
at 5:30.
So,
Awesome. I'll make sure I announce it
awesome.
tomorrow night
Perfect.
or next week and tonight. I was kind of happy it was canceled because I was traveling. I wasn't able to attend. So I'm happy to attend next week.
Awesome.
Any other questions for Chief Brogan? All right,
Good.
moving
Thank
right
you.
along.
Appreciate it.
Okay, we're going to move into item number 5, old business, and the Borough Code, Chapter 66, Housing and Property Maintenance. The issue is reviewing the cross-departmental coordination of rental licensing, inspection, and property maintenance and discipline. I know there's been a lot of conversation around Chapter 66 and how we manage it and really make sure it has some teeth, and are holding our rental, primarily student rental, property owners and residents accountable. Anyone have anything to add to that?
Well, how would you like to structure the conversation? Our Director of Building and Housing is here tonight. She can talk a little bit about the process of how that enforcement process works. The Chief of Police is here. He can talk about how the disruptive conduct reports are issued and what the consequences of those are. We also have reporting that's queued up. It's actually listed as attachments in the Smart Growth agenda as part of our monthly report, but we can certainly look at them here tonight.
I think it would be helpful to share with the residents in attendance, what we're doing. And we met offline and determined that, we're going to monitor it for the first semester and then decide what adjustments or changes we need to make going forward so that, again, it has a little more teeth and is effective. And, our residents feel like we've heard their concerns.
I want to add before you guys get started too, I did in the Westchester Community Campus Committee meeting, Scott Zukin is also a member of that committee, and we had our meeting last week, and I was able to share out with the committee, including him, some of the efforts that you guys have started to stand up and work through, which will help. Hopefully he'll relay that as president of the real estate, Real Estate Owners Association, is that what it's called? Yeah. So hopefully he'll start to relay that out. But yeah, I agree. I'd like to hear what Lisa was talking about too.
A place to start is in this flow chart, which details 3 ways that enforcement, 2 departments, and then there's 3 ways that enforcement actions are created. Most of the enforcement that we're talking about is either done by the police department and usually in response to noise disturbances. You can imagine what time of day those typically happen and what days of the week those are common for. And if the officer responding agrees in their discretion, and this is a word I'm getting used to using, working with Josh Lee, officers exercise discretion when they engage in enforcement. A disruptive conduct report can be produced, which usually accompanies a citation, usually a noise citation. Those are commonly issued in, these months are going to sound familiar, September, October, March, April, and May, and not so much in July and August or December and January. So you can kind of guess what drives this. It's large amounts of, it's this swelling and ebbing and flow of student population in the borough that drives these disruptive conduct reports. That's one way enforcement is tracked in our systems. The other way is the building and housing team is going out and doing routine or directed enforcement, and they are citing people typically for trash or overgrown vegetation, usually weeds. Or we might be going out and do a rental license inspection and might find something amiss when we do an inspection of a property. But what's important to note is that if the property owner abates the issue and pays the fine, no points get accrued. And it's only at the point that we only take people to court who are uncooperative. And Sally has some reporting that'll show you the frequency of that.
So what is the timeline for abatement and paying the fine? Like, could they do it 2 years from now, or do you track it
No.
for
No, typically,
month?
Sally could quote me on the exact days, but I'll answer the question in terms of trash because that's the one I know. You got to abate a trash issue in 24 hours, and you got to pay the fine in 7 days. And you got to do both of those things, or else we write a citation. So once a citation is written for a property, we track it. And the only way a point doesn't get accrued on a property is if the judge throws the case out or the defendant is found not guilty. So if the defendant pleads guilty or argues their case and is found guilty or pleads no contest, is that the same, legally speaking? We'll be notified of how that case is disposed and a point gets accrued. Sally, could you talk maybe a little bit about, there's a time lag there too between when we file our citations in the court filing. How long is it typically?
Sally, do you want to come up to the mic? I'm sorry.
Luke, Director of Building and Housing. So far, it's about 2.5 months.
That's an example of, so if we found a uncompliant property owner, which we did, and we did file a citation, it didn't get into the court's hands until 8 or 10 weeks later.
Yeah.
In that particular case, the one that we did file in July, the judge threw out the case.
Do we know why the judge threw out the case?
Yes, they did not like the way we had written the citation, so we went down and we had a conference with the judge and we worked that problem out. So and then we refiled the citation.
And is there a concern that the students are gone in 2.5 months? Is there a concern that the students are gone in 2.5 months? Like you might be a renter for a semester, or you may, be a guest.
Yeah, that's a perfect point, Lisa. All of this system, if you look at the top of this flow chart, is predicated on, well, it's not actually stated there. It's predicated on the same address and the same occupants in a one rental cycle period, which is a 12-month period starting July 1st. So you're absolutely right. If a property got cited in the 11th month of the rental cycle period, it's likely that the case would not be heard by the court until after the rental cycle period had expired and/or the renters aren't in that property anymore. So we really got to focus on the early part of the rental cycle to get compliance. And I think that's a good technique for managing compliance. You set a standard very early on. We know we have a lot of new renters coming in the fall, renters that generate the problems. So it's good that enforcement be its most active and strictest, I think, in the late summer, early fall months, which we're just getting into.
I assume somewhere down the line, maybe as you're working through this process, you may find that there are other triggers and levers that you need to pull that hold accountable those that are around longer than 12 months, right? Like there maybe right now, the way the process is designed, and we'll learn, it only holds accountable people that are transient, but maybe there's something that we need to do to hold accountable so we don't fall into that trap of, oh, it's only the first section of the year is really the piece that we can enforce.
Well, I think if we find that we want to, that would require a change in the ordinance, because right now the ordinance reads 12 months.
Change of yes. I mean, sure. So then but point being, I'm assuming that down the line, once we look at this, there possibly could be recommendations for changing the ordinance in order to help fill in some of these gaps. If right now you're already saying out of the bat that our best case to enforce anything is just at the beginning of the year and not necessarily at the end of the year when there's also things going on and spring has sprung and all good stuff.
Just to be completely clear, because this is a public meeting, enforcement is important for its own sake, regardless of whether we're going to lose out on the opportunity of getting somebody, points on the record, because the lion's share of our enforcement actions result in abatement of the nuisance. I'm talking about the building and housing side of things. And that's key. I think that's really important to note, that when our officers do go out and write tickets, the trash gets cleaned up within a day. I think it's also worth noting that if I had to say, just speaking from the way I'm looking at the system, the most impactful way to get feedback for the things we hear a lot about and the thing we heard about last month and the month before is in that police response, because one of those disruptive conduct reports results in a notification to the landlord and primes that property for, if they get a second one, the tenants, the landlord has to commence eviction process of the current tenants. That's a pretty heavy tool. Now, we didn't have 2 disruptive conducts on any one address in the prior rental cycle period. It's an important thing to consider.
So my question is, do we have enough people on the building housing side to enforce these rules, such as trash, such as upkeep in the yard with weeds? In which case, if we go after these little things, I think, it's kind of like the broken windows theory, right? If you go after these little things, then maybe some of these bigger things tend not to happen. But again, the question is, do we have enough staff to write these citations?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Jane Jacobs. So the broken window syndrome, you're absolutely right. Focusing on little things do mean a lot. Do we have enough staff? I feel like for the first time in my 3.5 years here, I can answer that question more confidently and say I think we're in the right zip code in terms of staffing. I want to see what we can do with our staff. We have a full-time building code official, plan reviewer, building inspector. We have 2 code enforcement officers who just started, and we have a very talented administrative assistant and a director on board now who is 4 months in and is learning every day and is an outstanding executive manager. And that was a gap I saw in the department. And we bridged that gap in this transition we've gone through. And I also reserve the right, if I may, to amend my opinion that we have enough staff at some later point. But I think we're in a good spot right now because we are starting to do more with the talent we have in staff, and what we have on staff now is similar to what we had on staff in the years leading up to 2019 in the building and housing department. And we went through some attrition that was related to COVID and some restaffing that took some time to get in place. And now our department looks a lot different than it has in my time here.
That's good news. Yeah, and a long time coming. Was certainly a gap. So I'm glad to hear that we've closed that gap. Any other questions, Mr. McGinnis, Ms. Shimoni? Any comments from anyone in attendance?
Well, do you need to finish? Do we do? Are we done the flow chart, or do we want other comments? I guess that's the question. Do we want to finish the rest of
The
the
flow chart.
Well, everything that you're looking at here below where points are accrued is basically what happens after this is the consequence section of the flow chart. So I'm going to tell you that a written warning to the landlord usually is a slap on the wrist. It's a form letter that we send out, and we typically get form letters back from the landlord, but it's at least a notification to say, hey, you're getting into hot water, especially if it's coming as the result of a disruptive conduct report, because we make it clear in those letters that the second one would result in the landlord having to commence eviction processes. We haven't had any evictions in the last rental cycle, and we haven't had any denial, revocation, suspensions of rental licenses. The department has discretion to choose one of those 3 options should we get to 10 points or a third disruptive conduct report. And then the landlord has the right to appeal that determination to this board, this committee. So I don't recall in my 3.5 years that ever happening. But if we were ever to deny, revoke, or suspend a rental license, I imagine there would be a hearing here because that's a pretty big deal. And so the stop point on this flow chart is really when when we're at a point where we've managed all the consequences and the event is closed until the next thing happens or the points are erased at the end of the rental cycle. It's probably one of the most complex administrative processes we have going in the borough. I got to be honest with you.
I like that you were able to put it into a nice chart here. So it's good to follow. Yeah, I guess, yeah, because so.
I would like to see the reports, and then we'll open it up, Mr. Travis. Sorry. Chief, did you have reports you wanted to share? Pretty sure I saw them.
So thanks, Chief Josh Lee. So Mr. Metrick said sometimes the police are the trigger here, or we're the front line, if you will, and most often that's as a result of a noise complaint. And if I heard the residents, including Mr. Travis, correctly last month, overwhelmingly it's the noise complaints and the junk that goes along with that, that brings the police on scene. So I focused on noise, and I'm going to show you an overview of January through June, and then also what July looked like for noise. So if you give me a minute or two to go through each slide, we can do that, and then that might spark some questions or whatnot. But if you look at if you remember the chart that Mr. Metric showed you, our piece is just this small piece in the very beginning of it, like we're kicking off, and then we send that data upstairs to the codes enforcement, and they're the ones that take the ball and run with it, if you will. So this first slide here shows noise citations for the year from January 1 through the end of June. There were 39. I'm sorry. Noise complaints. Where are we? I'm sorry, I'm one slide off. If we go to noise complaints for July, Bill, I think back one. There we go. So there were 39 noise complaints in July. Does that make sense? Yeah. So if we look by sector, by quadrant, not including the East Bradford noise complaints, which were 8 of them, we had 31 in the borough. Of those, of all of those, 10 of those occurred on the 4th of July. So it's no surprise that brought some conversation last month, because 10 of those occurred on the 4th of July. In the Southeast, it was about half. 19 of those complaints are in that black box there that occurred in the Southeast quadrant. So if we go to the next slide, if we look.
Calling dispatch and saying there's a problem over here.
Yep, that's somebody calling and saying, hey,
Service.
people are loud. There's a loud party, or there's a loud something. We code it as a noise complaint, a noise disturbance, and we go and we investigate. So if we go, yeah, here we are. So in July, this is going to break it down, and I broke it down in the Southeast by neighborhood, if you will, in the Southeast. And that black portion is where we had the most. And if we look at that black portion, that's the portion in the Southeast that's south of Market Street and east of Franklin Street. So south of Market and east of Franklin, not traditionally what we would call the college area, if you will. If we look at the red area, that's the second most. We had eight complaints there. I'm sorry, 6 complaints from the red area. And that's what I would say most of us are going to refer to as the Southeast College area. That's the area contained by High Street and Union Street, Franklin Street to the east, and Rosedale Avenue to the south. So in July, we had 8 from there. And if we go to the next slide, these are how all those complaints got resolved. 10 of the complaints were anonymous and unfounded, which means somebody called in and did not want to give their information, their name or their address. We still go out and we still investigate, but when we would go out, we found no noise, either no noise or noise that was not at a level that warranted any other action. 14 of the complaints had complaints, which means somebody called in and gave their name and their phone number and their address, described to us what was happening. But we went out, it was either over and wasn't occurring anymore, or didn't rise to the level of a violation. So they had complaints, but they were unfounded. And 8 of those did have complaints and were founded, which means we went out after somebody called and gave their information. We went out and we said, yep, this does rise to the level of a violation. So if we move to the next slide, we're going to break down those founded noise complaints in July. 4 of them were in East Bradford, so we'll forget about them. 3 of them received warnings for noise violations other than what we would say is a typical loud party. One was a delivery truck delivering prior to 7 a.m. One was somebody mowing grass on a Sunday, and one of them was a child's birthday party. One loud party received a warning instead of a citation. They could very well have received a citation. They did not. The officer elected not to. That occurred in the southwest section of the borough. If we go one more, this is going to break down every noise complaint from January through June. So these are all the complaints of noise January through June. Again, you see the biggest amount, about half, is that black area, and that's in the southeast. If we go to the next one, noise citations, January through June. Again, the largest is in the black area. We cited 25 people between January and June for violating the noise ordinance. One of them was in East Bradford, so we can discount that. 13 were in the southeast, and 11 were in an area of the borough that was not the southeast. And when we write a citation in the borough for noise, we also forward a disruptive conduct form to the codes department. That's the trigger. So that's where that chart really, starts flowing, if you will. So of all the citations that we wrote in the borough, we wrote 24 for noise. 22 of them were associated with a residence. So 2 of them were either people on the street or people in a car, not associated with a residence, not triggering a disruptive conduct form. And we sent 20 out of those 22 disruptive conduct forms to codes. One was a clerical error, an email that did not go through, resulted in one of those not getting sent, and another, to the best of my research, is just human error, an officer just neglecting to do it. So 20 out of 22, and we strive for 100%. We're not there, but at least we're close. And then moving forward, and I think this is important, it's not just it's not just lip service. I think it's good that as a governing body, we're looking at this. The more I think you learn about it, the more I think you'll realize the ordinance does have teeth, and maybe there are tweaks that you can make to the ordinance. But it is a process, and I saw the look on your face, Ms. Dorsey, when you said 8 to 10 weeks to get to court. Yeah, that's the way it is. When we write a citation, and if somebody has 10 days to respond to that citation with the court, with the plea of either guilty or not guilty. Once they plead, assuming they plead not guilty, on that 10th day, the judge will set hearing date, and typically that hearing date is 6 or 8 weeks after that. Oftentimes it gets continued because of a conflict, either on the officer or on the defendant or on an attorney or on the court. It's not uncommon for my officers, for example, my officers today that were testifying for these non-traffic citations. It's what we refer to them as, non-traffic citations. I just did this just anecdotally, but I stopped in. 3 of the citations that officers were there to handle occurred 6 months or more ago. And that's not atypical. That's the way it works. So I just say that to say, yeah, it's an imperfect system, but it is the system that we work in. But moving forward, the police department will continue to cooperate with Sally, with the codes department, with Sean, to make sure that we're doing what we need to do and forwarding the information we need to forward, and being a partner in any other way that we can, not only on this topic certainly, but on really anything. Enforcement is a piece, and Mr. Metrick mentioned that. Enforcement is a huge piece. Every year in September, we recognize that school is back. We put extra officers in areas where we anticipate we're going to need them. I don't want to say specifically, but we've increased we will be increasing our footprints, if you will, significantly through the first 6 weeks of Westchester University being back in, well through October, and continuing with homecoming, et cetera. I'm listening to your feedback. I encourage feedback and communication to me directly, and I'll incorporate that feedback into a best practice for us and a plan for us as far as the police moving forward. And either I or a member of my staff will come back every month with data that you'd want to see. If you give me feedback and you want different data or data in a different format, certainly let me know. I want to be as helpful as I can with that as well.
Any questions for Chief?
Chief, did someone really call the police on someone mowing their lawn?
Oh yeah. Yeah. But that's, yeah, Yeah, I mean, and it's ordained that, you know.
I was
you're
trying not to
allowed
laugh
do-
when you said that, but
I believe
just-
leaf blowers as well is a hot topic
Yeah.
in the United States, not just the Westchester Borough,
Yeah,
apparently.
you're not allowed to mow your lawn on a Sunday in the borough if you didn't know. And there are certainly people that know that and you know, will call and most residents don't know that. And that's a
Okay.
typical area where, but you laugh, but that's a very,
I didn't know that.
and that's a very
Sean,
good
put
example.
that down for an ordinance we might need to change.
Yeah.
So, you know, not to beat a dead horse, but that's a very good example of people ask the police to be vigilant. Yeah, they use words like vigilant and, you know, no breaks and stuff like that. I would expect my officer that if somebody called and said, Mr. McGinnis is mowing his lawn, you know, on Sunday at 11 o'clock, I would expect my officer to go out and talk to you and to resolve that situation without a citation because you didn't know.
Got it.
Yeah.
Oh, no. Well, I know you can't do construction on Sunday and okay. Thank you for that. So my other comment is to Sally, and I mentioned the broken windows theory earlier and enforcement and weeds and everything. And, you know, as I walk around the borough, I don't know if my colleagues have noticed, there's a lot of sidewalks out there with covered in weeds. What's the plan for that? What's the plan for these properties that look somewhat dilapidated in residential areas? You know, do we get in touch with you, obviously, and then go out there? Because I think that could go a long way, especially in the Southeast, you know, where there's a lot more student rentals there, and there should be that upkeep.
I mean, in a perfect world, it would be great if we, you know, staff was able to proactively just go out and look for sidewalks, et cetera. But we receive reports regarding sidewalks and other property maintenance violations. And within 24 hours during the week, I have a code enforcement officer out there to investigate. And I think we've had a great deal of success over the past couple months. Again, if it's not a success, we're citing someone. That means they've been completely uncooperative. And we've only, since I started in April, have had one citation so far make it to court, and it was dismissed. But we're seeing a great deal of success working with property owners. The officers come right back to the office. They look up emails, cell phone numbers. Over the years, there's been a lot of tracking to get that information, and they're on the phone immediately with the property owner. And you know, most work with us to abate the issues. We also receive complaints. That's how we know. Right, neighbors, because it's so dense here in town, neighbors do call, and we send people out.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments?
Yes, I do. I guess I'm a data person, so I love the charts and all the information being collected. So that's great. What I'd also kind of love to see at some point is a combination of the front end that you're pulling combined with the resolutions and like how long it takes to resolve. Like I have a little chart that I drew right here on my notepad here, you know, what I'm like envisioning, but basically, you know, I like the quadrant, the month that it was cited or conduct, you know, the month of the calls. Like I like that, the calls, the citations, the resolutions, and like kind of maybe like the resolution timing, if it's just like one line or something, but just to kind of have that step through so we can not only track the front end, but then eventually we can track it through to how we're resolving all of these things. So
Yes, ma'am.
I'd
And
love it.
If I can add, I think based on conversation I've had with Mr. Metric, of the 20 or 22, I forget the number now, but of the 20 forms that we sent, disruptive conduct forms that we sent, the codes enforcement has acted on all 20 of them, you know, and has sent out that initial trigger letter to all 20 of them, and then has received the correspondence back. Thereby, they've gained compliance, you know, and are in compliance with the rules and regulations. If I'm correct, Sean. Yeah.
Yeah, so it would be great to track that, that they sent the letter came back. Did it make sense? Whatever you got back. I mean, we've talked about this a little bit on the calls, or what we get back. does it make sense? Or do we have opportunity as we go along this path, by the time we get to November, do we have opportunity to kind of say, well, we've been looking at these letters and they've been saying these things, and maybe we need to try a different approach or something like that. I don't know, making it up right now. But that's why I would like to track that and what those things are saying. Because if all it is a letter goes out and 3 months later a letter comes back and they say the kids moved out and you're like, okay, it's closed. Again, it doesn't really get us the support that the residents were asking for last month. It just kind of, I don't know, it doesn't get the support I think that they're asking for, that they're looking for. So, but thanks.
Any other comments? Okay. Ms. Carroll?
Ann Carroll, and I will represent Civic Action Southeast because this is a topic that we have discussed at every meeting. As you can see, the Southeast is the target zone for a lot of this. And I would very much appreciate that a few ideas. First of all, warnings are, in my opinion, senseless because they have no teeth. I don't want to send, for example, on noise violations, I don't want to send kids immediately to court. But giving kids these days, unfortunately, a warning is not always sufficient. And if anything, if we can't get past that, and we've talked about this decade in and decade out, if we can't get past, all right, we're going to give them a warning, then at least when we're talking about the point system, it should be made clear on the warning that communication is made with the landlord, and that if in actuality there is a second event, then the first event will now count in the point system. So at least they're on total notice. As for the trash and all of that, in the past, and the weeds on the sidewalk, Mr. McGinnis's point, that there was a person from codes with the same staffing who did that, who walked the blocks, walked a couple blocks and cited the people. It was not on the residents to be the enforcement powers of the borough. And that puts the residents, when we have to do that, in a very difficult position. And I can tell you for a fact that the trash is not always cleared up in 24 hours because a house down from me, I have in the past recalled repeatedly, wound up calling the agent myself, finding out who the rental agent was. And then they sent somebody, but the landlord couldn't care less. So putting us in that, it's difficult. I had this experience many years ago, and I said I would never repeat it. I was threatened. My mother was threatened. They threatened to blow up our dogs. That was noise and other criminal behavior. Other people have punched holes in tires. It puts the resident in a bad situation. I asked over a decade ago that trash and sidewalks be cited like snow and ice. When we put the snow and ice ticket in, I asked, why would we not do that? The same thing for accumulation of trash, not putting your trash out, which kids, unless their parents are there nagging them, and I am not their parent, nor is Civic Action Southeast. So I would ask that enforcement be done. It is not on us to call and then action takes place. It is on people with eyeballs to drive around the borough. And another thing that I've been calling about is people leave their trash cans in the alleys. Juniper Alley is a good example in the Southwest. Maple Alley is a great example in the Southeast. I drive those alleys all the time. That's not up to us. We should be able to see that. Borough people who drive through should see it. We are not your first responders. But I thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Carroll. I hope you'll see the value in this evaluation process that we're undertaking now. Mr. Travis, did you have any comments?
I just wanted to put on record the purpose of that flow chart and the purpose of this discussion and the point system is to try to curb some of the behaviors we've seen that have been on the rise, especially during the school system. But we also need a working process when we start allowing short-term rentals. We don't have, I think we can all attest that that's a very confusing process. And oftentimes to Ms. Carroll's point, the beginning of the process is actually a phone call from a resident, and we'd like to see less of the burden on the residents. So as we're thinking through and reviewing and we're looking at new data, new reports, I think there's some things that we really need to keep in mind. One is a simple process that we can actually really enforce versus a complicated one that we have to train and teach over and over again. I know we're going to give this process a few months to evaluate it, but we definitely have to keep simplicity in mind. Also, the purpose of this whole conversation, the point system that I think has been in almost 2 decades now, I think it's 2007, hasn't actually accomplished its intended purpose. And I think for the sake of the record, we should talk about what the intended purpose of this whole process is, which is to have some teeth in terms of enforcement, to have enough punitive aspects to it to curb behavior. And I don't think those pieces are part of this right now. So that's something else that we need to think about. I just wanted to put a couple comments on record, but I also wanted to say thank you to everybody that's actually starting to pay attention to this. The fact that we're talking about it now, I think is a huge improvement and progress. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Comments?
Hi, it's Marty Nebel. There is some data that I think is missing. For starters, the points don't actually on the coding side, if I'm reading the chart right, they don't take into account that they abated and paid the fine. You don't get a summons until you don't do that. Is that right?
Mr. Nick, can you speak into the microphone so we can hear you?
So if
Thank you.
we have frequent flyers who are getting the fine and abating it in 7 days, that's still not solving the problem because they're getting a fine every month or every 2 or 3 months. So it would be interesting to see statistically, we don't need the addresses, but how many of those same addresses are popping up over a 6 or 12 month period before they get into the point system?
From residents, it's something that we recognize needs to be revisited. Anything that's 20 years old probably requires or, warrants a review. And as I mentioned, when I opened this agenda item, we have had conversations as a committee around what our next steps are. We have decided to evaluate this first semester from September to December and really gather the statistics in addition to what Chief Lee has provided. And I think the consensus is that we'll need to make some adjustments so that I think I started out using teeth, and I've heard it a couple of times this evening, and that's really what we want this enforceable and to have impact. So the residents see a change. Any other comments? Okay, seeing none. I'm going to move on to 5B, approval of the July 2024 meeting minutes. Any questions or concerns from committee?
Nope.
All right, and then new business, item 6, special event applications. We have 3, one for Unite for her 5K, Fiorenza's Chili Cook-Off, and Oktoberfest Beer Hall Townhouse. Mr. Karowski's not here.
But I did review the applications. Thank you, Keith.
Can you hear me? I'm sorry. I didn't know if I was coming through.
Hear you just fine. And not to steal your thunder, but the chili cook-off survives, but it's relocating to the block on Church Street between Chestnut and Gay.
Okay. Yeah, I was just going to touch on the three events in order, if that was okay, really quickly.
That sounds perfect. Thank you.
First one, the Unite for Her, that is a return event. It's one of the larger 5Ks that we have, but it has run successfully the last several years without any issues. So I don't believe there'd be any issue from the police department and or Parks and Rec for the approval of that event. The second event, which is Fiorenza's Chili Cook-Off, the police department, myself, and the Fiorenza group have been in numerous conversations regarding this event to make sure it can run as smoothly as possible. They should be commended for picking up this event when the good folks at the Rotary Club were no longer able to continue to support it. They do have one other ask that would need to be voted upon by this committee, as they are looking to add a beer and wine garden to the event. The beer and wine garden would be pretty much identical to the one that we have at the restaurant festival a few weeks prior to this event. They need the approval from this committee and from council as a whole so they can take that information to the PALCB to get approval for their permit to have alcohol on the premise.
Well, Mr. Krowski, will the beer garden be where the chili cook-off is happening, on Church between Chestnut and Gay, or will it be like around the corner in the parking lot?
It would be on the Church Street, the 100 block of North Church, in between Gay and Chestnut. Literally the same setup as the restaurant festival. It will be staffed by Westchester Police Department, as is the same setup for the restaurant festival. Or I shouldn't say staffed, it would be monitored by.
Okay. Any other questions from committee?
No.
I'll say one thing. I used to be involved with Fiorenza's Food for Friends. I was on the board a few years back, and really excited that you guys stepped up. You know, it's a top-notch organization that rescues food for those who are food insecure and in need. And it's really, I think it's great that you guys are saving the chili festival and coming to Westchester to help do that. So thank you.
Thank you. My name is Derek Fiorenza. So thank you, Nicole, and thank you guys for having us. Keith, thank you for all your help. I also want to recognize Tyler. He's with the Masons. He's going to be helping us with volunteers for that day. So I just wanted to make sure we recognized him as well. Thank you for the opportunity. We appreciate it. We care about the people that are suffering.
Council, my name is Tyler Queen. I'm the secretary of the Westchester Masonic Association. The Westchester Masons have been in the community since 1858. So we've been here a long time, and we're incredibly happy to partner with Derek and Fiorenza's to run the volunteers for that day, as well as provide numerous donations to the Westchester Food Cupboard. So we believe in feeding the hungry as well. I'm really looking forward to partnering on this event with you all as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you both. And October Beer Hall Townhouse, Mr. Kurowski?
Yes, this would be a new event this year. Again, we have been in conversations, the borough, the police department, Parks and Rec, with the folks that are organizing the event. This would take place basically in the activation zone that's directly in front of the post office on Gay Street. There were stipulations. I don't know if they got put through on this email. I believe I had sent them through, but there was a certain set of stipulations that we had asked that they would cover. It's in that email at the end there. And they have agreed that they have to fulfill all these stipulations in order for this to take place. And I believe they have agreed to do so. Again, it would be monitored by the police department. They would have to set up fencing. They would be checking identification, and they've agreed to do all those. And they're in the same situation as Fiorenza's. They need the approval from this committee and council as a whole to present to the PALCB.
Any concerns from committee?
No.
Okay. I don't have any other questions.
Thank you.
And number B, item B, sworn personnel vacancies in the police department. Chief?
Quick question. So we're going to approve all three of those items and put them on consent, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm still Josh Lee, the police chief, and this is on behalf of civil service. The police department is 2 officers short of our complement of 44, and civil service would like council to direct them to begin the process to hire new officers. Process that is a months-long process, and if we're very fortunate, we could be able to kick off at the tail end of this year or beginning of next year. But I believe it takes an action of council to direct civil service to do that.
So does that require the civil service test and
Yes, ma'am.
we're starting from scratch? Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other questions?
No.
All right. Could go to consent. Agenda item number 7, other business.
I just want to bring up one item. I want to thank Sergeant Malicki today. Great conversation about the concern of putting a stop sign on the corner of Dean and Church. There were some ideas and suggestions about that. I believe we're going to work with Public Works, and I believe he did fill you in with that, Chief Lee.
He did, yes. And just as a reminder to anybody, when we do have those traffic concerns, we have officers that are dedicated to handling them. There's a form that can be found in the form center, a request for traffic services form. When that gets filled out, we're usually pretty prompt. Within a week or two, we will take action and get back to whoever it is that we need to discuss. So I'm glad you had a positive experience there for sure.
We've seen a couple of questions, comments, concerns on traffic. The other end of High Street, I forget the gentleman's name, as well, has raised just to what, and I believe you made a couple of recommendations of how we can slow traffic down on North High Street.
Yeah, I know another concern was has always been really high in Washington Street and the frequency of crashes that occur there. We're looking into that. I did provide some data to the people that were asking there. There are some options. A stop sign per se really is not an option. Removing parking along High Street from either Chestnut Street or Washington Street, really from Chestnut Street through either Marshall or Lafayette would be one. It would increase line of sight. It would also widen the roadway, give more room for the cars. We would avoid a lot of those mirror-to-mirror crashes that we get along that corridor. That would definitely be the least expensive option. The other option and the most expensive option would be engineering a traffic signal for the intersection of Washington and High Street. And that would require not only the engineering, but it would have to be tied in with the signals along the High Street corridor so as to not create even more problems. And that's obviously not something we could do, overnight, but it'd certainly be up to council to exploring which option they'd want to go with.
So I wonder, Mr. Metric, if we can refer that to Ramsey Reiner, the parking director, and see what the impact is of removing parking. It's quite a bit of parking on North High Street. So I'm guessing there would be an impact to residents as well as businesses. The theater comes to mind right away.
Yes.
Any other items? Okay, appreciate everyone's attention tonight. We adjourn the public safety at 6:40. I think it's a record for me anyway.